This is dumb for me to ask because I am a close friend of yours, but how did he die?
He passed. I mean, he passed away from non-alcoholic pancreatitis
Okay.
that went septic. So
Okay.
he had pancreatitis before, and so I can remember the day. It was Thursday, October 22nd, and we were doing a Chiefs parade at work.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom had called me that morning, and she told me that Jeff had went to the hospital. He had pancreatitis again, and she said she was really worried about him. Well, I knew he had pancreatitis before. He was at the hospital, so in my mind, he's gonna be okay. You know, he's in the right. You know, he was gonna be okay, and so that was my mindset all day.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's fine. And I did later that day because my mom mentioned it a couple of times, which I thought was odd because normally she I don't know if she had the sense that something was wrong. So I did text him that day, and I just said I love you. I hope you get better. Get better soon. And my mom calls me screaming that he coded, and I'm in my office, and I remember my friends Gabby and Jordan that day. They're like, "Are you worried about your brother?" And I was like, "No, he's gonna be. Again, he was in the hospital. Like he's gonna be fine." And then she called me, and they could hear her. He coded. So I'm just grabbing things and rushing to get to my house, rushing to call my wife. Tell her what's going on. So we go over to the house. She gets over there. This was during COVID too. So at that time, the rules were he could have one visitor a day and they could not be interchanged. So Melissa, his wife, was there with him. If someone is actively passing, you can have two. COVID was a hard time. I saw it on my end with hospice and losing loved ones, but it was kind of different to go through it in that. But so that, we get to my mom's house. She's asking if she can come up there. She couldn't come up there yet. And then maybe an hour or so later, he codes again. And so she was able to go up to the hospital. So I drove her up there, and then headed back.
Earlier, you were like, he's fine. He's at the hospital. Had anything like changed from that feeling, or were you still, or had the feelings of like something's wrong?
When my mom called me screaming,
Mm-hmm.
that he had coded, I mean, I knew something was wrong.
Okay.
I think my instant reactions to pray for a miracle, pray that healing. And
Yeah.
I've learned that sometimes you don't get those the way you think you are supposed to. Um, and that is okay for me. I'm saying that for me. I'm not saying, everyone has to process that on their own. But I do know, like, so yeah, I was worried at this point. He had coded twice. Then my mom finally comes back home that night, and basically they had got him back to doing better. If things changed, they were going to give us a call. We'd go up there. Essentially, I knew if I got another call, this was probably it. So it was probably 10, 11 o'clock. It was probably 10. It was about 10. We finally get home for the night. We had, put our daughter down to bed. And then we lay down, and I may have closed my eyes for not even a minute, and the phone rang, and I knew instantly. So my mom told me he coded again. So I got dressed and went and picked up my mom. We went to the hospital. I tried to go in, they wouldn't let me. So I can remember I even have a picture because it was raining that night of just of the hospital, just sitting in the parking in the car. And I was at this point I was sobbing. I was. It was later that it was a couple hours went by. My mom called me and she said that she wanted to switch places with me, and they were going to allow it. They were going to make an allowance that I could go up to see Jeff. The only thing is she could not come back up. So I instantly told her no, because I didn't want, as much as I wanted to see my brother, even though he wasn't responsive because he was on
Mm-hmm.
a vent at this point. But my mom said, no, I can't be in there when this happens. And I know you need to see your brother. So it felt like such a walk of shame. It's not like a walk of shame, but like it's just like a weird walk. It's not shameful, but it's such a weird walk to walk in the hospital and like go up the elevator, and then I cross path with my mom because she's coming out and I'm coming in.
Yeah.
We hug, and then I walk up, and you're walking to what like
Might be the last time you see him.
yeah. And we were still hopeful I mean, we were still hopeful, like something would change. The labs would come back, something would change. When I got there, they had him on an epi drip. They were pushing epi into his IV, and so epi helps keep his blood pressure up.
Yeah.
And they were doing this. They had checked his labs again, and at some point, we wanted them to do one last lab check to see if there was any progress, and the results came back there wasn't. And basically there was nothing else we could do. And so the only way they were keeping him alive essentially was all the epi that they were giving him and the life support. And so we had to make the decision together to sign the DNR. And so I learned a lot about my specific career in hospice because signing a DNR, I've always, it's always like, yeah, you want to sign a DNR, but when you have to sign it for your loved one, even though like that's the best decision, that there is nothing else we can do, having to, I mean, I didn't sign it, his wife signed it, but like having to make that decision is a really hard decision. And especially with him being younger, obviously he was younger.
Yeah, because like I imagine like thinking like if I'm a person of faith, do I need the DNR? Like I can't imagine like the thought process of like, well, something might change. He might, what happens? Like, I mean, how long do you keep fighting? And I can't imagine anybody having to go through that. That's
Yeah.
tough. Is that sort of kind of like the end of the story?
Almost. So I get up there. Sorry, I know I told you a long story.
No.
So
That's what we're here for.
I get up in the room and he's completely unresponsive. He wasn't squeezing my hand back, but I still talking to him. I was able to say my piece, but from that point, me and Melissa were the ones in the room. And so we had finally signed the DNR and agreed to stop the epi. And they had educated us on like what it would look like. And so they said that once the epinephrine gets out of his system, that, his blood pressure will go low, 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 low. It will go up high real quick, and then it'll go low. So that way we didn't get freaked out when it went up high again, with hopes. And I sat there with her for another 2 hours, and he was still with us. And, I love that. I mean, I love that I had this time, but at that point I asked him, I said, is it the drip that's causing it? So we ended up deciding to stop everything, the drip, and then pull the tube. And so because it was COVID, I FaceTimed my brother who lives out in California, my mom, and me were on the phone, and then Melissa was on the other side of the bed. And, they pulled the tube out, and, he like opened his eyes, and like, I can't even explain it, but, and like looked at Melissa, and then slowly blood pressure went lower, 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 and then did the high thing, and then he was gone.
Dang.
So, and that sucked. I remember I went and hugged Melissa, and she kind of collapsed a little bit, and she had said her goodbyes, and she'd stepped out the room, and I was there with Jeff, and I just hugged him tight. I just said, I love you, and, crying obviously. And then when I say walk of shame, it's not a shameful walk, but then we had to make the walk out of the hospital, past all the nurses in the hallways, and you could tell in their hearts were broken. Obviously, no one wants to see anyone go through that. And, but yeah, that's the story of his passing essentially. Yeah.
That's tough, man.
So
Wow. Gosh.